This episode is brought to you by Schwab. You want control of your financial future, and Schwab knows that. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it most. You can also invest on your own or trade on Thinkorswim, their powerful award-winning trading platform. Plus, you'll get low costs, transparent pricing, and 24/7 live help. Because Schwab understands it's your financial journey, and they believe you should have choices in how you invest. Visit schwab.com to learn more. Hey everyone, quick note here at the top. The news in Gaza is moving fast. At the time we recorded this, the Israeli government was considering a hostage deal with Hamas, which could include a pause in fighting. We'll have more on that after the holiday. Today's show is about how the conflict in the Middle East is resonating back at home and how it will continue to resonate no matter what the next few days bring. So, Alex, can you watch this ad with me?
Okay, yes.
Alex Sammon writes about politics for Slate. I just sent it to you.
Okay.
This political ad I wanted Alex to watch. Versions of it have been cropping up around the country. In New York, Pittsburgh, anywhere there's a progressive congressperson who is not fully supporting Israel's war in Gaza.
She's one of only 7 Democrats in Congress to vote against missile protection for Israel.
This ad is from Detroit. It takes on Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Her legislation would allow the terrorists to rearm themselves, and she refuses to answer even this horrific question.
You can't comment about Hamas terrorists chopping off baby pets?
This ad wraps up by saying Tlaib is on the wrong side of humanity, urging viewers to call her directly and complain. I'm kind of curious, when you see ads like this, what you think as a political reporter.
I mean, the ending note is crazy. Against humanity is it's a tough indictment to beat.
Is it fair? Do you feel like?
Oh, I mean, I would certainly say no. The idea about rearming terrorists and the description of those votes, I would say, are just ultimately not very accurate descriptions of her record or even any of those resolutions in Congress.
Alex has been thinking about ads like this one because of what they say about the Democratic Party, where it's at and where it's going. Leadership has struggled to work with the progressive squad since the beginning. But the war in Gaza has brought all those bad feelings to the surface. It's brought money, too. The Israel lobby has promised to spend as much as $100 million to get representatives like Rashida Tlaib out of office this cycle. The thing is, many Americans seem to agree with the progressive stance here, at least in part. Even congressional staffers have been chafing at their boss's unyielding commitment to Israel, especially military aid. Hundreds walked off the job to protest.
There are tectonic shifts going on, I think, under the surface in American politics right now, especially as pertaining to the Israel issue. And I think, the Washington establishment, the Biden administration, a lot of these offices have been really slow to react because it has never happened like this before. It's something very different.
What does the onslaught of expensive ads tell you about who's winning this disagreement over Israel right now?
The Israel lobby, of course, is very, very powerful, and maybe the most powerful lobby in Washington, incredibly well funded. At the same time, if you're winning the hearts and minds of people, you don't need to spend tens of millions of dollars. You don't need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think both things are true, and sort of we'll see. Well, sort of the proof will be in the pudding of this election cycle in a lot of ways.
Today on the show, why no matter what happens in Gaza, the Democratic Party is preparing to be reshaped by war in the Middle East. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. You are listening while you're driving, cleaning, exercising, maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you could be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's really easy, and you can save money by doing it right now from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average. And auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year. So you're protected, no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. This show is brought to you by Discover. You know, in today's world, it can seem that the best treatment is reserved for only a few. Well, Discover wants to change that by making everyone feel special. That's why with your Discover card, you have access to 24/7 live customer service, as well as $0 fraud liability, which means you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases. Finally, no matter who you are or where you are in life, you'll feel special with Discover. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Limitations apply. Okay, let's start off by talking about what we know about how Americans feel about the war between Israel and Hamas. Like, what does polling tell us about that right now?
Yeah, it's the polling is fascinating because for a long time, I think there's been this consensus view that Americans support Israel, period. It's the easiest position to take in the world. You just do it and you don't think about it. And the polling that we've seen on this recent conflict has been so stark. It's so different than that. And across different demographic groups, it's been resounding. The sort of lack of support for the Israeli response to the Hamas attack is just, it's very, very strong. I mean, we have seen now a handful of polls. It started, I think, with a Data for Progress poll that said a majority of Americans support a ceasefire, which across all political identities, which is astounding.
Wow.
Yeah, right. It's like a majority of Republicans even broken out supported a ceasefire, majority of independents, and then it was 80% of Democrats supported a ceasefire. And that was at a time when 12 maybe representatives in Congress were calling for a ceasefire, maybe fewer than that. It's huge, a chasm between, what we're seeing in Congress and what we're seeing in the sort of American popular sentiment. Obviously, this is a huge concern for Biden's electoral chances.
Yeah, younger people tend to want a ceasefire more or want less militarism when it comes to Israel.
Absolutely. The sort of handling of the issue altogether, the sort of unlimited military aid, no conditions on that aid, pulls terribly. The sense of the Israeli response in Gaza, overwhelmingly negative feelings towards that. Biden's embrace of Netanyahu pulls terribly. So, yeah, 18 to 35s again and again. I think the most recent poll said 70% disapprove of Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict.
So if I was like a Democratic politician, to me, this would be like a check engine light flashing. But has it been seen that way in Washington?
I think it's starting a little bit. There's a little bit of movement now. I mean, it's been very slow, though. I mean, there's been a ton of resistance to this. And it's like the light is flashing red that this is not what voters want, that it's a huge point of disagreement that is alienating them. And yet the administration has continued on this path. Democratic voters already not in love with Joe Biden, as we well know, now have a real thing to hold on to that say, it's not just he's old, it's that he's sleepwalking into this thing that we want nothing to do with. And I think that makes all those things much more acute.
I should say here, neither Alex nor I put a whole lot of stock into presidential polling a year out from an election. And even though national surveys show many Americans are reluctant to provide unlimited aid to Israel, progressives who speak out are definitely hearing from constituents who feel unheard and alone. Consider the case of Jamal Bowman. He represents New York's 16th district. Just like Rashida Tlaib, the pro-Israel lobby has threatened to primary him. And since October 7th, even some longtime backers have begun to question their support.
Yeah, there's a ton of cross pressure. It's really interesting with Bowman in particular because, right, as you say, a very well-known member of Congress, right, a member of the squad, and he's very popular. I mean, he's an incredible communicator. He's someone who's taken a lot of, I think, courageous votes and led on a lot of issues. And in any other sense, you would say this is certainly one of the rising stars in this party. Like he's a black representative, new to Congress but has won re-election already. And you see, like, right, this incredible cross pressure where people say in his district that they love Jamal Bowman, and yet on Israel-Palestine in particular, he gets a ton of heat because there is a lot of organization in that district. Pro-Israel organizations have a lot of purchase in Westchester County and in these places he represents. And so they're wired into a very, very effective organizing network that's very well funded.
Yeah, I mean, according to this reporting in the Times, Jamal Bowman was literally being told, don't show up to this Jewish event. People don't want you there, which is just like, that seems big to me because you always want your elected representative there if you're an organized group.
Right. Yeah, right. So you get a sense of how acrimonious this is.
So does someone like Jamal Bowman have a primary challenger yet? Like someone who's going to step forward and basically say like, okay, I'm going to represent Israel here while you are doing what you're doing.
It's funny. It's actually funny because local news in Westchester County has reported that George Latimer, who's the Westchester County executive, he's a white man. He's 70 years old. He would be one of the oldest freshmen, a 70-year-old freshman has decided to run against Bowman. Latimer himself has sort of been a little wishy-washy on it. He hasn't like made a big announcement and is sort of like, I don't know if there's some last second cold feet going on here, but like, I think the general assumption is that he is going to attempt to primary Jamal Bowman in this seat.
Yeah. I'm sort of curious where Democratic leadership is on all of this because control of Congress is really tight. There's a chance that in the next cycle, Democrats do better. It's so close. So how is someone like Hakeem Jeffries, who's leading the Democrats in Congress, how is he thinking about something like a primary threat to Jamal Bowman, who is very popular and sort of survived in New York when a lot of Democrats didn't?
Yeah, it's an incredible tension. It's like one of the great sort of profound stories, I think, in this election cycle. And I'm so curious to see how this is going to play out because, right, on one hand, you have Hakeem Jeffries, who is a lover of incumbency. He's like his whole thing, like to a fault, loves incumbency. Like if you're an incumbent Democrat and you are opposed to abortion, this is actually not even a hypothetical. You're opposed to abortion rights. You are opposed to gun control. You basically are an enemy of every Democratic policy priority, but you're an incumbent Democrat. Hakeem Jeffries will go to the mat for you. He will protect you. He will spend money. He will endorse you. That's how he is. That's always who he's been. And he even started his own PAC to protect Democratic incumbents against progressive primary challengers.
I'm sensing a but is coming.
There's a huge but coming. Yes, there's a huge but coming, which is that that has not really had to extend to progressives because there haven't been that many incumbent progressives in the past. And now there are. Now there are 7 of them, the ones that we've mentioned, who have done at least one cycle. Some of them are 2- and 3-term incumbents. And they now are marked for primary challenges, and they're going to be extremely well-funded primary challenges. And Hakeem Jeffries is going to have to take a position on this. And I can tell you now, he does not want to. He does not want to at all because the challenges are going to be funded by his own backers. I mean, like in the last election cycle, Hakeem Jeffries received more money from the Israel lobby than any other outside group. Like if you go to like the AIPAC website, Hakeem Jeffries is all over it. It's like video montage of Hakeem Jeffries and photo of Hakeem Jeffries and then like all of Republican House leadership and then like Hakeem Jeffries again. Like this is who he is. And now the same group is going to spend probably $100 million in primary races in the Democratic Party in this coming cycle. And a lot of that money is going to be spent opposing progressives who are incumbents in the Democratic Party, the same people that Hakeem Jeffries has said will be defended under any other circumstances, no matter what. And the challenge is crazy because, is he going to go against his own backers? Is he going to go against his own funders and protect these incumbents? You would have to say if he doesn't do that, it's an insane act of hypocrisy. But at the same time, if they're going to defend these progressives against these primary challenges, they're going to have to spend against $100 million in spending. So are we talking about spending that, precious limited resources in safe blue districts to ward off the very same people that are funding Hakeem Jeffries? Like, all the wires are crossed here, and it's a really, really interesting problem.
After the break, AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, has been getting more powerful for years. But it's how it's using that power that's really important. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. This episode is brought to you by Schwab. You want control of your financial future, and Schwab knows that. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it most. You can also invest on your own or trade on Thinkorswim, their powerful award-winning trading platform. Plus, you'll get low costs, transparent pricing, and 24/7 live help. Because Schwab understands it's your financial journey, and they believe you should have choices in how you invest. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. When Alex Sammon mentioned AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and the way they've started targeting progressive incumbents, I wanted to talk to him more about that. On the one hand, it made perfect sense to me that an interest group would want to make Washington as amenable to its desires as possible. But I did wonder how this one group had made itself so important. So I asked Alex to tell me.
AIPAC is so interesting because it is a group that has long identified itself as bipartisan. It's a group that endorses Republicans, gives them money, that supports them in a lot of ways. It also endorses Democrats and gives them money and supports them in a lot of ways. For a long time was sort of seen as just a truly bipartisan organization. It's not that really anymore. And in the last handful of years, they've hired, the digital director from like the Trump Republican National Committee. They've hired out of like the evangelical world. They've like staffed up at like really senior levels from really, really conservative organizations. And not coincidentally, what has happened is that they have changed the way that they operate in American politics, especially in Democratic politics.
What do you mean?
So in the last cycle, in the 2022 cycle, they did something which they had never done before, which is they got involved in outside spending, independent expenditure spending in Democratic primaries, which they'd never done before. And they don't do this in Republican primaries. They still don't do it. But they got involved in a really profound way, which is that they raised a bunch of money from Republican mega donors, Bernie Marcus, Paul Singer, like top Trump supporters, really conservative luminaries and stalwarts. And they ended up spending upwards of $30 million in open Democratic primary races, which are safe blue seats. A lot of them were either vacant because of retirements or because of redistricting. And their goal was basically to ensure that the most conservative Democrat in that race won the race because they know Republicans can't compete there, but they want to move the political spectrum to the right. And so they champion these conservative Democrats in these races. Importantly, often Israel policy was not mentioned even once, and they managed at an incredibly high clip to win these races. So they really were very successful. The amount of spending was staggering. We're talking about $35 million.
Is that a lot?
It's so much. It is so much. It's the most of any independent outside group for congressional races, spending $4 million, $5 million, $7 million in one House district, which is often what happened, is so much money. And we had never seen that before. And now they are saying that they are going to triple that in the coming cycle. So there's a sense that the model worked. And the reason it worked in part was because Democratic leadership didn't say anything. They had a chance to head this off. They could have said that this is unacceptable for a group that's raising money from Republicans, that is, staffed by Republicans, that is, in very many ways in lockstep with the Republican Party to intervene in democratic elections is not acceptable. They didn't do that.
I mean, you're not alone in your alarm over this. Like, a Democratic advisor told the New York Times that he'd been in politics for 30 years, but the last cycle was the first time he'd seen a disturbing new phenomenon, which was two groups, AIPAC and crypto, getting involved in Democratic primaries with big amounts of money. I just wonder, though, explain to me why it's disturbing. Because to play devil's advocate, isn't AIPAC just representing their interest, which is pro-Israel?
Yeah. If that were the case, I think it'd be easier. It would be easier to contend with. But that's not how this has happened. And I think that it's really important that that's not the case, especially in that 2022 cycle. The ads that we were seeing were actually not like the ads that we just watched against Rashida Tlaib. They were ads that scarcely mentioned Israel policy at all. In fact, often they made no mention of it because this wasn't really a high salience issue for a lot of Democratic voters. And so they knew that they weren't going to win elections by saying, this person supports unlimited military aid to Israel. Please vote for them. That's not a popular position anyways. And so these ads never said that. These ads said, this candidate that we're backing is the real Democrat. This is the person that's going to back Joe Biden. This is the person that's going to get the agenda passed. And I would say, not to put too fine a point on it, but like pretty misleading, like pretty strongly misleading given what was actually happening. Because what the actual motivation was, of course, was like, try to make the caucus as conservative as possible. Try to get people in there who will be amenable to Republican policy priorities and positions, because this is a group, it's raising money from Republicans. It's staffed by Republicans. At the same time as they were doing all this action in Democratic primaries, they endorsed 109 House Republicans who voted to overturn the 2020 election results. So, this is not even like a sort of moderate sort of shoot the gap in the middle thing. This is, on the Republican side, they are championing the most extreme and the most right wing.
Is there another interest group that's analogous to AIPAC?
Yeah, I think actually the best analog is the NRA, is the National Rifle Association.
Why do you say that?
There are a number of reasons. It's almost hard to believe now, but the NRA at a time not that long ago was also a bipartisan organization. It was like it was a very powerful lobby in Washington, tons of funding, very influential, endorsed Democrats, endorsed Republicans. Democrats wanted endorsements from the NRA. It was like perceived to be like a really smart policy position, right? To be pro-gun, and they wanted that backing. They sought it out, and they bragged about it when they got it. And there were money reasons for that. There were also supposedly like strategic policy reasons. And then the NRA underwent a really dramatic shift, and in a very similar way to what we're seeing with AIPAC, started staffing up from Republican groups, from far-right groups in particular. The whole organization sort of like experienced some mission creep to the right pretty quickly. And in just a couple cycles, it went from being a group that was truly actually bipartisan to being a group that was so far to the right that no Democrat would want an NRA endorsement. No Democrat would court the NRA for support, and they certainly wouldn't say out loud to Democratic voters, hey, I have the backing of the NRA. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now with AIPAC in a lot of ways. Like there are these eerie parallels in terms of the staffing decisions, in terms of the way the organization has moved to the right. It's embraced Republican policy priorities far beyond the scope of the thing that it most cares about, allegedly, which is, was gun control with the NRA, is Israel policy with AIPAC. This is a group that's basically in lockstep with the Republican agenda across the board. And I think part of the reason we're seeing them spend so much is because of this tension, because the group is moving so far to the right. They know that they can't just quietly do things the way that they used to. And that sort of thing is ultimately kind of untenable.
Let's say AIPAC gets everything it wants and a bunch of progressive Congress people are out. Maybe some more conservative Democrats are in, or maybe even Republicans. What does that mean? Like, where does that leave Congress?
Yeah, so that is a really important caveat to put on my last point, which is that, yes, their influence may in fact be waning unless this works. Because if it works, then it's a profoundly different political landscape. For one thing, it's taken a lot of years to build up this sort of progressive base in Congress, and it's not big, right? It's we're talking about 7 members. There are some squad adjacent members who are very progressive as well, but you wouldn't say exactly that they're the same. It's taken a lot of years and a lot of organizing and a lot of infrastructure building and a lot of commitment to do this, and it could all be gone in one election night. And Once that's gone, it's very hard to build it back up. And for the party itself, I mean, can you imagine swapping out, Jamal Bowman, I think, is 47. But, for Congress, that's young. For Democrats in Congress, that is very young. He is the future of the party in a lot of ways, right? We always say, like, what's the future of this party? It's like this multiracial coalition, young voters. Like, Jamal Bowman does great with young voters. Imagine knocking him out of Congress for a white 70-year-old freshman conservative, moderate conservative backbencher who's going to spend, a couple of years in Congress and then retire. I mean, the reset is horrible for the long-term longevity of the party, because this is where it's going. When we've, both moderate and progressive Democrats have said, this is how we see ourselves. This is the future. If you lose all those young reps, all those people who are notable and who can speak to this coalition that Democrats need to win elections, I mean, that is a huge setback. It's a colossal setback to the well-being of the party, and that's true if you're on the far left end of the spectrum. That's true if you're in the middle and just would prefer Democrats to win elections in just a very sort of broad, straightforward way.
Alex, I'm super grateful for your time and your reporting. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Alex Sammon is a political writer at Slate. And that's our show. If you're a fan of What Next, the best way to support our work is to join Slate Plus. Going over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. What Next is produced by Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Paige Osborne, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.